The painting was supposed to be a portrait of my wife, but the woman in the frame was holding a knife I had hidden in the basement. Julian stood in the center of his studio, the smell of turpentine suddenly replaced by the metallic tang of fresh blood. He had painted the piece from memory, a tribute to a woman who had disappeared 3 years ago. But every time he blinked, the figure in the oil moved. First, her head turned, then her eyes opened. Now, she was looking directly at the spot where he stood. A cold draft swept through the room, though the windows were bolted shut. The candles flickered and died, leaving only the moonlight to illuminate the canvas. In the silver light, he saw the painted knife begin to glisten with a thick, wet, and very real liquid. "Where is it, Julian?" a voice whispered from the walls. It didn't sound like his wife. It sounded like the grinding of stone against bone. He backed away, his heel catching on a loose floorboard, the exact spot where he had buried the evidence of that final night. Suddenly, the canvas ripped. A pale, slender hand, covered in streaks of blue and crimson paint, pushed through the fabric. It was followed by a shoulder, then a face that looked like a cracked marble mask. The art was stepping into the room, wet and heavy. Julian scrambled for his palette knife, but his fingers were numb. The figure stood tall, her dress a swirl of unfinished brushstrokes that blurred at the edges. She moved with a strange, stuttering motion, like a film reel skipping frames in a haunted theater. "I gave you everything," Julian stammered, his back hitting the locked door. "The fame, the talent, the life." The figure tilted her head, and a drop of black oil fell from her, like a tear. She raised the painted knife, which was now solid and sharp. The room began to transform. The walls bled into the colors of his landscape paintings, vibrant greens and deep, bruised purples. He wasn't in his studio anymore. He was being pulled in the background of his own creation, a world of flat light and no air. He felt the cold pressure of the frame against his spine. The wood was tightening, a rectangular trap of gilded oak. He looked down and saw his legs fading into a wash of watercolor. He was becoming a sketch, a mere suggestion of a man in a world of ink. The woman leaned in close, her breath smelling of linseed oil and old earth. "Now," she hissed, her voice a vibration in his chest. "You will be the one who sits still for eternity. I'm tired of being a muse. I want to be the artist who survives." She stepped fully out of the frame, her feet making heavy, wet thuds on the floorboards. She looked at her hands, flexed them, and picked up a clean brush. She looked like the perfect woman, except for the faint, painted seam that ran down her throat. Julian tried to scream, but his mouth was just a stroke of charcoal. He was pinned to the canvas, his eyes fixed in a stare of permanent, painted terror. He could see his studio, his house, and the world he once knew, all from behind a layer of varnish. The woman walked to the window and threw it open. She breathed in the night air, a triumphant smile stretching across her face. She looked back at the canvas, gave a mock salute, and walked out of the room, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. Days passed. When the police finally entered the house, they found nothing but an empty studio and a new masterpiece on the easel. It was a hauntingly realistic portrait of a man trapped in a dark room, his hand reaching out toward a viewer who wasn't there. They marveled at the technique, the way the tears on the man's face seemed to catch the light. They never noticed that the paint was still wet, or that every morning the man in the portrait had moved just a few inches closer to the edge of the frame.